Welcome back to F1 Burnouts. I am buzzing right now, and I mean absolutely buzzing. Preseason testing is done. The cars are being crated up, shipped to Melbourne, and in just a few weeks, we race. For real. No more sandbagging, no more glory runs on low fuel. The 2026 era of Formula One begins at Albert Park. Now, if you caught last week's episode, you'll remember we ranked all 11 teams after week 1 of testing. We had Mercedes on top, Ferrari second, McLaren third. Well, week 2 just threw a few spanners into those rankings, so buckle up, because today we are breaking down everything from the final 3 days in Bahrain. The teams that looked scary fast, the ones that looked scary for all the wrong reasons, what the pundits are saying, and what on earth we should expect when the lights go out in Australia. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the headline act, Charles Leclerc. Final day of testing, last hour of running, and the man goes and sets a 1 minute 31.992. That is the fastest lap of the entire preseason, both weeks combined. Almost 9/10 quicker than Lando Norris. 9/10 in testing. Now look, I know what you're thinking. It's testing, it means nothing, fuel loads, tire compounds, blah, blah, blah. And you're right, mostly. But there's something about the way Ferrari operated across these 6 days that felt different. Leclerc was consistently quick, their long runs looked competitive, and then there's the small matter of that rear wing, which we'll get to in a moment because, honestly, it deserves its own segment.
Okay, let's talk about the wing. Because Ferrari didn't just bring a new rear wing to Bahrain, they brought a conversation starter. While every other team has their active aero flap opening upward in straight line mode to reduce drag, Ferrari's flap rotates a full 180 degrees. It literally flips upside down. The front portion ends up pointing downward, the rear part faces upward. It's like someone at Maranello looked at the regulations and said, you know what? Everyone else is doing it the boring way. The rules say the wing has to transition between 2 fixed positions in under 400 milliseconds. They don't say how far it can rotate, so Ferrari just kept rotating it all the way around. I love it. I genuinely love it. It's the kind of out-of-the-box engineering that makes Formula One beautiful. Now, Ferrari themselves have been cautious, calling it a test item, something they're evaluating. But the fact that they ran it on track, on Hamilton's car no less, tells you they're serious about it. Gary Anderson, legendary F1 designer, called it astonishing. And honestly, I agree. Whether it makes it to Melbourne or not, this is peak F1 engineering creativity.
Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the 7-time world champion in the room, Lewis Hamilton. His week 2 was, let's call it, eventful. On Wednesday, he lost 90 minutes to a technical issue. On Thursday morning, 5 laps. 5. He spent 2.5 hours sitting in the garage while the team worked on rear brake duct problems and dealt with a shortage of spare parts. Fred Vasseur came out and said they were already preparing parts for Melbourne, which, I mean, that's a nice way of saying we broke stuff and we're running low. Hamilton ended the test with 71 fewer laps than Leclerc. 71. Now, is this a crisis? No. Is it ideal preparation for a new team, a new car, a completely new set of regulations? Also no. But here's the thing about Lewis Hamilton. We've seen this movie before. The man has walked into situations that looked impossible and turned them into masterpieces. He's got 3 weeks to get up to speed before Melbourne, and I wouldn't bet against him. But there's no question he's on the back foot going into round 1.
Now, I need to talk about my people, my team, the Papaya Army. McLaren. And I'm going to try to be objective here, emphasis on try. Oscar Piastri was absolutely rapid in week 2. Day 1, he was just 1/100th of a second behind George Russell for the top spot. 1/100th! On day 2, he slotted in second again, 0.5 behind Antonelli. And across both weeks combined, McLaren completed 817 laps. 817! That's more than any other team. Nobody even crossed the 800 mark except McLaren. That tells you 2 things. The car is fast and the car is reliable. And as a McLaren fan, I'm not used to saying that second part. Reliability and McLaren haven't always been on speaking terms, shall we say. But Lando and Oscar are looking like the real deal. Now, Norris was second on the final day, 9/10 behind Leclerc, but that's a headline lap. The long-run pace is where the truth lives, and McLaren looked right in the mix. All right, let's talk about the team that most of the paddock is calling the favorites heading into Melbourne. And no, it's not Ferrari, it's not McLaren, and it's not Red Bull. It's Mercedes. George Russell was the overall fastest across both tests combined based on long-run analysis. He topped day 1 of week 2. Kimi Antonelli was blisteringly quick on day 2 with a 1-minute 32.803. And here's the stat that matters. Mercedes completed the most total kilometers of any team, over 6,100 kilometers across testing. Their race simulations on Thursday showed Russell's average lap times edging out the other frontrunners on long runs. That's not sandbagging. That's a team that knows exactly where it stands. Russell is the championship favorite right now with the bookmakers at plus 230, ahead of Verstappen at 240 and Norris at 430. Let that sink in. George Russell, the preseason championship favorite. If you told me that 3 years ago, I'd have asked what you were drinking.
And then there's Max, 4-time world champion Max Verstappen, quietly going about his business, sliding into third on the final day, about 1.1 seconds off Leclerc's headline time. Red Bull completed 672 laps. Solid, if not spectacular. But here's what's really interesting, and this came straight from Toto Wolff, of all people. Wolff said, and I love this, the Red Bull Ford power unit is the benchmark right now. He said their energy deployment on the straights is worth about a second per lap over consecutive laps. A second. That's Toto Wolff praising Red Bull. When your biggest rival is saying nice things about your engine, either he's playing mind games or he's genuinely worried. I think it's a bit of both. Verstappen doesn't need to prove he's fast in February. He proved that in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December for the last 4 years straight. The man is so boringly dominant that his idea of a bad season is winning the title with 6 races to spare instead of 8. Red Bull in testing is like a lion yawning at the zoo. Don't mistake the calm for weakness.
Okay, now we need to talk about Aston Martin. If you listened to last week's episode, you'll know we ranked them dead last, 11th out of 11. And I said I hoped week 2 would be better for them. Well, it wasn't. It got worse. Lance Stroll completed 6 laps on the final day. 6. And that wasn't by choice. A battery-related issue with the Honda power unit shut them down more than 2 hours before the session ended. Across all 6 days of testing, Aston Martin managed just 334 laps, the fewest of anyone. For context, McLaren did 817. That's nearly 2.5 times as many. Now, the race published a piece this week with a headline that should send shivers down every Aston Martin fan's spine. They called it the disastrous Honda spiral that Aston Martin is trapped in, and they drew a direct comparison to McLaren-Honda in 2017, that failed partnership. Same symptoms. Lowest mileage on the grid, persistent power unit failures, Honda down to their last battery on site. Honda themselves said they're not happy with both reliability and performance. Lance Stroll estimated they're 4.5 seconds off the frontrunners. 4.5 seconds. And as much as Adrian Newey is a genius, and we talked about his radical design in episode 3, the best chassis in the world means nothing if the engine can't keep it on track. Fernando Alonso deserves better than this. The man is 44 years old, still fighting, and his car can barely make it out of the garage. I genuinely hope they find answers before Melbourne, but the clock is ticking very, very loudly.
Now, there is a bright spot in all of this, and it's coming from the team nobody expected, Cadillac, the brand new, fresh off the assembly line American newcomer. They ran reliably throughout testing. Valtteri Bottas put in a 1-minute 35.290 on the final day. Yes, that's 3.3 seconds off the pace, but think about this for a moment. 1 year ago, this team didn't even officially have the green light to enter Formula One. They built a car from scratch with the Ferrari power unit, staffed up an entire operation, and they completed more laps than Aston Martin. I mean, let that sink in. A team that has existed for about 5 minutes is outlapping a team with the resources of Lawrence Stroll behind it. Look,
Cadillac will almost certainly be at the back of the grid in Melbourne, and that's fine. That's expected. But the fact that they ran smoothly, racked up over 1,700 kilometers, and didn't have any major disasters, that is an unimaginably good start. Bottas and Perez are the perfect veteran duo to guide this team through its growing pains.
Now, remember last week when we talked about the start procedure chaos? Only 2 or 3 cars got off the line during practice starts in week 1, and we flagged it as a genuine safety concern. Well, the FIA listened. They trialed an extended procedure in week 2, adding 5 seconds of preparation time, and it worked better. But the politics behind the scenes? Oh, that's peak Formula One. McLaren's Andrea Stella pushed hard for the change, and you know who blocked it? Ferrari, because Lewis Hamilton has been absolutely nailing his practice starts, like blisteringly fast getaways every single time. So Ferrari's thinking is transparent. If we've got an advantage, why change the rules? And here's what's interesting. While Verstappen is out there calling these cars Formula E on steroids and saying the regulations are anti-racing, his championship rival Lando Norris said the new cars are, in his words, a lot of fun. That's the reigning world champion, directly contradicting the 4-time world champion. I think Norris has the right attitude here. These cars are different, they're challenging, and that's not a bad thing. But whether the start procedure makes it into the actual regulations for Melbourne, that's still being debated.
Now, we've covered the technical regulations in depth over the last few episodes. The fuel revolution in episode 1, the engine wars in episode 2, the aero arms race in episode 3. So I'm not going to re-explain all of that. But what I do want to talk about is what the pundits are saying now that they've actually seen these cars in action. Martin Brundle wrote something fascinating this week. He said he's enjoying watching the 2026 cars moving around so much that it makes him appreciate the drivers even more because they can't just lean on massive downforce and stability anymore. And I think he's absolutely right. These cars are harder to drive, and that's a good thing for the spectacle. But here's where it gets spicy. Damon Hill predicted the gap between first and last in Q1 at Melbourne could be 1.8 seconds. Johnny Herbert thinks it'll be more like 1.2 or 1.3, and Carlos Sainz warned it could be even bigger than that, potentially 3 seconds from front to back. Think about what that means. In a sport where we've been complaining about cars being too close in design, too predictable, we might be about to see the biggest performance spread in years. The teams that have mastered energy deployment, and right now that looks like Red Bull, based on what Wolff said, those teams will have a massive advantage. This new era is going to reward the smartest teams, not just the fastest ones.
So, Melbourne, March, Albert Park, the moment of truth. Who are the favorites? Now, last week I went out on a limb and predicted Kimi Antonelli as world champion, and I stand by that. The kid is fearless. But for Melbourne specifically, I think we're looking at a genuine Big Four battle. Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, all within about a second of each other. Martin Brundle called Mercedes' pace and reliability relentless, and that's exactly the right word. Russell has been the most consistently impressive driver across both tests. Their race simulations were the strongest. The bookmakers have Russell as championship favorite at plus 230, ahead of Verstappen at 240. But don't sleep on Ferrari. Leclerc's headline pace and that flip wing could be a game changer. And McLaren's 817 laps of reliability give them a strategic edge nobody else has. Red Bull? With that engine deployment advantage Wolff flagged, Verstappen could be the dark horse everyone should be afraid of. This is going to be the tightest season opener we've had in years. Now the midfield is going to be fascinating. Williams had a concerning test, running softer tires than everyone around them and still not matching where you'd expect them to be. That's worrying for Albon and Sainz. Alpine has been relatively quiet, but Pierre Gasly was just a tenth off Russell on the final day, which is intriguing. Haas had incredible reliability, over 6,000 kilometers, but we don't really know where they sit on pace yet. Racing Bulls with Lawson and the rookie Lindblad, who, by the way, will still be 18 years old when the season starts, they completed over 400 laps in week 2 alone, which is quietly impressive. And then there's Kick Sauber with Audi Car, who have been present, which, for Sauber in recent years, actually counts as progress.
You know, before we wrap up,
I want to say something that I think gets lost in all the lap times and drama. We are about to witness something truly special. A complete reset of Formula One. New engines, new aero philosophy, new fuel, new everything. The last time we had a regulation change this seismic was 2014, and that reshuffled the entire competitive order for years. Teams that were dominant fell, teams that were struggling rose, and somewhere out there might be a team, maybe one we're not even talking about right now, that figured out something in those 6 days of testing that nobody else has. That's the magic of a new era. Nobody really knows where they stand until the flag drops in Melbourne. And honestly, that uncertainty, that anticipation, the not knowing, that's what makes being a Formula One fan so incredibly special. These are the weeks where dreams are still alive for every team, every driver, every fan in the world. All right, that is going to do it for today's episode of F1 Burnouts. Testing is done, Melbourne is coming, and I cannot wait to do this all over again with actual race results to scream about. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a fellow F1 fan, especially if they're an Aston Martin supporter, because they need something positive in their life right now. I'm kidding, sort of. Until next time, keep the rubber on the track, keep the battery charged, and remember, in this new era of F1, it's not just about who's fastest, it's about who's smartest. See you in Melbourne.